The envelope is sitting on the kitchen table when I walk in. It is not addressed to me. It never was. But I can read the return address from 3 feet away, Hargreave and Nkosi Attorneys, Cape Town. And I know that whatever is inside that envelope is about to change the shape of every room in this house. My mother is already crying. Not the soft kind. The loud kind, where she wants someone to come running. My sister Liesel is standing near the window with her arms crossed. And she is watching me the way you watch a door you think might blow open. My father sits at the head of the table with his hands flat on the wood, perfectly still, the way they go still when he's calculating something. On the table, between the fruit bowl and the water jug, sits a small tin of homemade Coke Sisters. I brought them. Liesel hadn't noticed. My mother certainly hadn't. Welcome to Calm Revenge Tales, the channel where no one shouts, and justice still finds its way home. If this is your first time here, subscribe before we go any further. I promise you, what happened in that room was worth waiting for. My name is Bronwyn Erasmus, and I am a structural engineer. I say that not to impress you but because it is directly relevant to everything that follows. I calculate load-bearing capacity for a living. I understand what holds things up, and what happens when the foundation is quietly wrong. I had been living in a rented flat in Stellenbosch for 6 years by the time this story reaches its climax. A clean 2-bedroom, no frills, paid for by my own salary. I had no debt, a reasonable savings account, and a second-hand bakkie I serviced myself. I had built what I had without asking anyone for anything, and I was 31 years old and genuinely fine with that. My mother's mother, Franzi, was 83. She lived alone in the original family house on Morganster Road in Parle, the one her late husband had built himself in 1962. 3 bedrooms, pressed tin ceilings, a stoop wide enough to park a small car on, a fig tree in the yard that nobody had planted on purpose, but that had grown there for 40 years regardless. Franzi could no longer manage the stairs comfortably. She had said as much to my mother, who had nodded and said, "We'll think about something." And then thought about nothing for 2 more years. I had been visiting every second Sunday since I was 17. I drove the 40 minutes from Stellenbosch. I brought her things she liked, buttermilk rusks, those Coke Sisters she had taught me to make when I was 9, sometimes just a freshly charged tablet so she could video call her sister in Namibia. When she was cold, I sat with her. When she was sharp, she corrected my Afrikaans and beat me at rummikub and told me things about my own family history that my parents had never bothered to mention. "Jy het jou pa se kop maar jou ouma se hande," she told me once. "You have your father's head but your grandmother's hands." She said it like a compliment. I kept it like one. My parents and Liesel visited perhaps 4 times a year. Liesel sent flowers on birthdays, which is fine, except that the flowers always arrived the day after, and they were always lilies, which Franzi was allergic to. The call came in March. Liesel was getting married, to Christoph van der Westhuizen, whose family owned 2 car dealerships in the northern suburbs, and there would be an engagement dinner at my parents' house. Semi-formal. The whole family. Franzi had been invited. The invitation came through my mother, as a text message. "Dinner Saturday 7 p.m. Bring something if you want. Is coming so please behave." I noted the please behave. I had never in 31 years behaved in any way that required that instruction. Franzi called me separately on the Thursday. Her voice was the way it got when she was tired and also trying not to show it. "You'll be there?" she asked. "Yeah, Oma. I'll be there." "Good." A pause. "Bring the Coke Sisters. Not the shop ones." I said I would. And then she said something I didn't fully understand until much later. "There are things I should have said sooner, Bronwyn. You'll know what to do." I thought she was talking about the family gathering. About being polite. About not reacting when my mother made a remark about my hair, or Liesel made one about my clothes. I brought the Coke Sisters. I wore a blue dress. I drove to Parle in the late afternoon while the mountain was still catching the last of the sun, and I told myself this was just a dinner. The fig tree in my parents' garden had been there since before the house. I had climbed it as a child. As I parked, I noticed for the first time that its roots had pushed up through the paving stones near the garden wall. Nobody had fixed it. Nobody had even noticed. The dinner was a performance. Liesel sat at my mother's right hand and received toasts and compliments and a speech from my father that lasted 11 minutes, during which he cried twice. Christoph's family talked about the wedding venue, a private wine estate in Franschhoek, approximately R280,000 for the day, and my mother nodded the way you nod when you have already agreed to pay for something, and are now deciding whether to feel proud or afraid. Franzi sat at the end of the table in the chair my father had positioned farthest from the kitchen heat, which was also farthest from the conversation. I sat beside her. We ate waterblommetje that my mother had bought from a caterer and served in her own pot, and Franzi ate 2 bites and put her fork down and looked at her hands. Partway through the main course, Liesel announced that she and Christoph were hoping to stay in Parle, close to family. She said it with a particular smile directed at my parents. My father said, "We've been thinking about the Morgenster Road property." The table went quiet in a specific way. Uma's house, I said. My father looked at me with an expression I had seen before. The one that means you are being inconvenient. There's a lot of land there, he said. Liesel and Christoph could develop it properly. Build something on the back portion. It makes sense. Franzi's hands were in her lap. I could not see them, but I saw the small movement in her jaw. Has anyone asked what she thinks? I said. My mother said, Bronwyn. Just the name. No sentence. Just the name, as a door being shut. Liesel said. It's not like anything's been decided. In the tone of someone for whom everything has already been decided. One of Christoph's aunts, a woman named Hannah with a pearl necklace and a very fixed smile, almost said something. Her mouth opened. Then she looked at my mother, and she closed it again. Franzi looked at me across the table. She did not speak, but her hand came up and rested on the tablecloth between us, and I put mine over it, and that was that. I said, I'll take you home. My father said, we haven't had dessert. I said, I know. I helped her with her coat. I carried her bag. I drove the 6 blocks to Morgenster Road, and I sat with her on the stoop under the porch light while the moths came and went. And I made us rooibos from her kitchen, and neither of us said very much at all. As I was leaving, she went to her bedroom and came back with a small cardboard tube, the kind architects use for rolled drawings, sealed at both ends with masking tape. She held it out. Keep this for me, she said. Somewhere safe. I asked what it was. You'll know when, she said. You'll know when. The next year and a half had its own arithmetic. I recalculated my budget and began spending 7 Sundays out of every 8 in Parle instead of every other Sunday. The extra petrol cost me roughly R600 a month. I rearranged 2 project timelines with my clients to free up Wednesdays. I hired a garden service for Franzi's yard, R450 a month, which I paid from my own account. My parents called twice in that period. Once to ask if I would contribute to the wedding gift fund. A kitchen renovation for Liesel and Christoph, who had moved into a new double-story development just off the N1, not on Morgenster Road, as it turned out, because the bank had valued the land development at less than Christoph's family found attractive. The second call was from my mother, who said that Franzi was becoming difficult about the house, and did I think she could be encouraged to think more practically about her future. I said I thought Franzi was thinking very practically indeed. The cardboard tube sat in the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet at home. I moved it when I reorganized the drawer in winter. I dusted it off. I put it back. I did not open it. She had not asked me to open it. The unexpected grace in that period was the cooking. Every Sunday Franzi and I made something together. Tomato brie with the tomatoes from her garden. Melkos on cold mornings, the kind with cinnamon and butter that she made in a single pot, and that smelled like something very old and very safe. Once, when I mentioned I had never learned to make her Coke-sister dough from scratch, only ever assisted, she made me do it alone while she sat at the kitchen table and gave instructions she had never written down. More, she said, when I added the cardamom. That's already. More. I added more. They were the best I had ever made. She looked at my hands when I finished plating them. She said, "Ju esi hand. Your grandmother's hands." If you are still with this story and you haven't yet subscribed, now is the moment of highest uncertainty, and I want you to be there for what comes next. Hit subscribe so the rest of this finds you. She died on a Tuesday in September. In her own bed, in her own house, with the fig tree visible from the window. I had been there the Sunday before. We had made rusks. She had been tired but not diminished. She had held my hand when I left and said, "You're a good girl, Bronwyn. You always were." Her final words to me. I have not needed better ones since. The letter arrived 6 weeks after the funeral. I had expected grief. What I had not expected was the summons. A formal request from Hargreave and Nkosi attorneys to attend a meeting regarding the estate of Francie Johanna Kellerman, née Dupreez, on a Thursday afternoon in Cape Town. All named beneficiaries required. My mother called me that night. Her voice was the warm version, the voice she used when she wanted something. She said that she hoped I understood this was going to be straightforward, that the house on Morganster Road would naturally pass to my father as Francie's surviving child, and that any arrangements after that were a family matter. I said I understood. I brought the cardboard tube with me. I had opened it the night before for the first time, at my kitchen table, at 11 p.m., with a glass of water and the overhead light on. I unrolled what was inside. I read it 3 times. Then I rolled it back up and sealed it and put it in my bag. And I sat for a while with my hands flat on the table the way my father's hands go flat when he's calculating something. The conference room at Hargreave and Nkosi was on the 4th floor with a view of the mountain. My parents arrived first and chose the 2 seats nearest the attorney's chair. Liesl came with Christoph, who had no reason to be there but had come anyway, which told you something. I sat at the corner of the table and placed the tube in front of me without explanation. My mother looked at it. "What is that?" "Something asked me to keep for her." The attorney, a small, precise woman named Adiz Nkosi, entered at 2 p.m. exactly. She had a lever arch file, and the specific expression of a person who has done this many times and finds human behavior unsurprising. She explained that Francie had updated her will in October, 14 months before her death, with the assistance of a colleague at Hargreave and Nkosi, conducted in person, with 2 witnesses, with a certified letter posted to each named beneficiary at the time of signing to confirm its existence. My mother said she had received no such letter. Ms. Nkosi opened her file and produced a signed delivery confirmation. My mother's signature. September 14th, 3 years prior. My mother's hands went still. The will divided the estate as follows. The house on Morganster Road, valued at our 1.4 million, and its contents went to Liesl and my father jointly. The fig tree, the pressed tin ceilings, the stoop, all of it. Liesl exhaled visibly, and then Ms. Nkosi continued. The land on which the house stood, a separate title deed, registered independently in 1987 when UPA had subdivided the earth for tax purposes, was bequeathed in full to me, Bronwyn Mare Erasmus. Alone, 1,200 square meters of parl soil, valued in the current assessment at our 890,000, on which a rental agreement would now need to be negotiated with the landowner, me by any party wishing to continue occupying the structure. My father stood up. His chair scraped the floor. He said something I will not repeat here. My mother began to cry. The loud kind again. Liesl looked at Christoph and then at the window and then at her own lap, and her face did the thing faces do when they understand, fully, what has happened. It was Christoph's face I noticed most. He had gone a color I can only describe as ash. Because he had been the one, at that engagement dinner, who had explained to my father over the second bottle of wine that the real value in the Morganster Road property was always the land. The structure was worth nothing without it. You couldn't develop, couldn't bond, couldn't sell, not meaningfully, if someone else owned what the house was sitting on. The word land had been his weapon once. It was mine now. I waited for my father to finish. Then I unrolled the cardboard tube onto the table. It was the original 1987 title deed subdivision document. In Upa's handwriting, annotated in the margins in Franzi's careful script. And tucked inside it, a single index card on which she had written, in blue pen, "The house is just walls. It's what holds it up that matters." I looked at my family. I said quietly, "That's what she wanted me to know when." Ms. Nkosi gave us all 2 weeks to consider next steps. I used one of those weeks to draft a letter to my parents and Liesel with a formal lease offer. Our $6,200 per month, indexed to inflation, 5-year term, renewable, standard maintenance clauses. It was below market. I had checked the market. It was a fair price, and I had made it fair on purpose. My father's response, via his own attorney, was that the will was improperly influenced, that Franzi had not been of sound mind, and that they intended to contest. Hargreave and Nkosi responded with the GP notes from Franzi's last 4 years, requested and provided with her advance authorization, which showed no cognitive decline of any relevant kind, and a signed affidavit from the 2 witnesses present at the signing, one of whom was a retired magistrate. The contestation was withdrawn 6 weeks later. My parents signed the lease in November. Liesel and Christoph were not living in the house. They had their own double-story off the N1, paid for by his family's dealership money, so my parents were, effectively, paying me to occupy the house they had assumed would simply become theirs. I do not take pleasure in that. But I do not apologize for it either. I offered once more in a phone call with my mother to discuss a reduced rate if she could tell me one true thing about why Franzi had been left to manage alone for so long. She did not answer the question. She told me I had always been difficult. I said that I understood her perspective, and I wished her well, and I meant it, in the limited way one can mean such a thing. That was the last conversation we had that year. What I have now is a Sunday routine. I drive to Parle. I let myself in through the garden gate on Morgenster Road with the key Franzi gave me years ago, which I have never returned and which nobody has asked for. I check the fig tree. Its roots are still pushing up through the paving, slow and inevitable and entirely unconcerned with what the paving thinks about the arrangement. I make Coke Sisters in her kitchen. I use more cardamom than seems right. They come out exactly as they should. The inheritance wasn't the land, though the land is real and documented and registered in my name at the deeds office in Cape Town. The inheritance was the knowledge of what holds things up, and the patience, learned over 40 years of Sunday afternoons, to wait until the weight comes down on the thing that was always meant to carry it. Thank you for staying until the end of this one. These stories matter because most overlooked people never get to see the moment of justice, but sometimes the people who love them do, and they carry it forward. If you know someone who has been quietly holding someone else up, call them today. Tell them you see it. That costs nothing and means everything. Share this video, leave a comment with what stayed with you, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I'll see you in the next one.